Good evening. I'd like to call the special board meeting for Benicia Unified School District to order for September 9th, 2019. Let me start the session, please, with roll call.
President Ferrucci?
Here.
Trustee Hogan? Here. Trustee Mark Maselli?
Here.
Trustee Moss? And Trustee Seda? Here.
Okay, if everybody please stand and join me in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and
Okay, I need to call for an approval of the agenda as it's written tonight. Can I have a motion, please?
I move that we approve the agenda as written.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Okay, comments from the public. Members of the public may address the board at a regular meeting at any item within the board's jurisdiction. Cards may be completed requesting to address the board. They are available at the back table and may be submitted to the board secretary at the meeting. The governing board allows speakers to speak at regular meetings on agendized and not agendized matters under public comment. Comments are limited to no more than 3 minutes per speaker. By law, no action may be taken on any item raised during public comment periods, and matters may be referred to staff for placement on a future agenda of the governing board. So seeing no one, Georgina, I assume we have no speaker cards. We are moving on to our non-consent item for the evening. Okay, so we called this special meeting tonight because as a governing board, we agreed that we wanted to gather some more information and look at the possibility of a resolution moving forward to put into place the laws that are recorded in the California Voters Act. We had some questions that we felt like we needed to have some legal representation clarified for us tonight. So we've invited Peter Fagan to come forward and share with us exactly what this is and what this would look like for Benicia, and then a possible resolution so that we begin to do some more work regarding this.
Thank you, and good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, it's working? Okay. You have a clicker? Working? Okay, it is working. Okay, the California Voting Rights Act, that's what we're here to talk about. Before I get into it, I just wanted to let you know what this is that I laid in front of you. They are student art cards. We sponsor a student art contest. It's K through 12 statewide, and the winning students' art turns into note cards. So you only see one one picture there, but once you open it, there'll be several others. And we do it every year. I think it's through a partnership with AXA. So hopefully you'll find those useful. Okay, now on to the California Voting Rights Act. It's been around for 16 years. There have been a few waves, I would call it, of litigation related to the California Voting Rights Act, and then another couple of waves of transitions. When it was enacted, almost all public agencies elected their councils, their boards, through at-large elections. About probably 10 years ago, it was still less than 20% elected their officials through by trustee area elections. So it was still, by and large, a lot of at-large elections. Now, after 16 years, I think we're getting close to 50% of public agencies that now elect their board members or council members through at-large elections, but still, approximately half still through at-large elections. The California Voting Rights Act prohibits the use of at-large elections, and that's the reason why we're seeing this transition of public agencies to the by-trustee area. If such an election impairs the ability of a protected class to elect candidates of its choice or to influence the outcome of the election. It's a very low bar to meet. There's a Federal Voting Rights Act, which has a much higher threshold to meet than the California Voting Rights Act. And I'll do a little editorial here now. Based on my experience, and I've been working in California Voting Rights Act for not quite 16 years since it started, but probably 12 years, and have worked with in excess of 50 school districts who have addressed this issue and made a transition, or decided to fight and then decided not to fight and made a transition. And it appears, based on the statute as first written and the amendments that most recently occurred, that the state legislature really wants public agencies to conduct their elections by trustee area elections. And they've written the statute in such a way that the only way that you can be shielded from potential liability is to convert to by trustee area elections. So I'll go on through a little bit about this. I said it's much easier. The third bullet point is an important one. Under the Federal Voting Rights Act, in order to find a violation, you have to prove an intent to discriminate. Under the California Voting Rights Act, no such proof is required. So you don't even have to look at it. The other thing in California, under the Voting Rights Act, there's the kind of hammer that is hanging over public agencies' heads is the right of the plaintiffs to collect attorney's fees and expert fees. And if they win, and so far they've won every time, there has not been a single public agency that has contested this and won. And so the amount of attorney's fees you'll see on some subsequent slides here is a significant amount of money. And even if a district were to win, you wouldn't have the right to collect your attorney's fees. And so when I say the deck is kind of stacked against the public agency, that's one of the ways that it is stacked. Here is just a list of some of the litigation to date of public agencies that have actually contested whether or not they thought they needed to switch to by trustee area elections. And the real issue in switching is kind of the term of art is racially polarized voting. If it can be proven that there is racially polarized voting in your district, and all that means is if there is a member of a protected class who voted for a particular candidate and that candidate did not win, then, and that was the preference of that particular class of people, then you have racially polarized voting. And so that's why it's a very, very low threshold. Now, all of these public agencies, Hanford Joint Union, the City of Modesto, Madera, the Tulare Healthcare District, as I said, this applies to all public agencies, not just school districts, decided to fight in one way or another. And you can see the amount of fees that they wound up paying, plus they wound up having to switch anyway. So they all converted to by trustee area elections after spending this kind of money. And then in this particular case, the city of Palmdale, this is one of the more recent fights. And this was, they fought about this for quite some time, a couple of years, and wound up settling, as you can see, for $4.5 million. And they had to pay their own attorney's fees as well. And as you can see, the attorney's fees for the public agency are significantly less, but you have to pay those if you're going to fight, and then if you lose, you pay the others, and then you convert anyway. City of Santa Monica right now they have been contesting this, and you can see the last two bullet points there. This is going to be the most costly fight regarding California Voting Rights Act, and this is right in the heart of the area where the plaintiff's attorney, who is behind most of these cases, and you have not received a letter, thankfully, so, but Kevin Shankman is the kind of, I'd say, the plaintiff's attorney who is kind of the driving force here, and he's from Malibu, right next to Santa Monica. And so you can see that, and that's not even resolved yet. So it's an estimate that they'll be paying $10 million when they eventually decide to call the appeals quit and move on and move to the only safe harbor. And the safe harbor is to Well, first let me explain what safe harbor is. I mean, you've got a harbor down here, but a safe harbor in a legislation is, it lays out what you have to do in order to protect your district from liability. That's the safe harbor. And the only safe harbor in the law is to divide into trustee areas and then hold an election under that system. And once you've done that, you're within the safe harbor and you cannot be sued for a violation of the California Voting Rights Act once that process has been completed. And once you start the process, which you may be doing tonight, that puts you within certain timelines that you need to complete the process, but that also will protect you from a lawsuit because will have made that decision on your own rather than under the threat of litigation from a demand letter or a lawsuit. The thing about the trustee area voting is that currently people from all around the district can vote for each of you. In a trustee area election, you have to live in the trustee area that you run in, and only the registered voters that live in that particular area get to vote for you. As I said, there was a recent update to the law, AB 350. And if you remember back a few slides to those large amounts of money that public agencies were spending to convert to by trustee area elections. One of the things that thankfully the legislature decided to address was there was the scenario, and it was a very common scenario, that a public agency would receive a demand letter from a plaintiff's attorney saying, we believe you have racially polarized voting, you need to convert to by trustee area elections, it's a violation of the California Voting Rights Act. The public agency would call us right away. At their very next board meeting, they'd pass a resolution to convert to by trustee area elections, and they'd go through the process and do it. At the end, they'd receive a demand for attorney's fees and expert witness fees, and invariably, many times they were in excess of $100,000 or $150,000, when nothing really had been done other than write the letter, or at least from our perspective. I mean, it's hard to tell. And so then you contest it and argue about it and try and negotiate a settlement. And many times those settlements were anywhere from $75,000 to $125,000 just to go on with life after making the switch. Thankfully, the legislature took that on. And when they created a new process, they also capped plaintiff's counsel's attorney's fees at $30,000 if a public agency responds within 45 days and then converts within 90 days after that, after passing a resolution. So that was a very nice amendment to the process. So it now caps, public agencies are not going to be settling immediately and saying we will convert and still having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's capped out at 30, but still $30,000 for writing a letter is when you can do it on your own is something that there's no point in spending when you have a fiduciary obligation to your community and your district. So potential next steps. I'll lay out the process here of what it would take for you to convert to by trustee area elections if you decide to do so, and then I'll answer any questions that you might have. First thing is you pass a resolution, and that starts the safe harbor window. And even though you haven't received a letter, we still have the timeline, because if you go beyond the timeline, then a plaintiff's counsel could say, well, you're outside of the safe harbor, because with the amendment, the legislature made it clear that once you start the process, you need to finish the process in that time period. Once it's started, there's two what we call pre-map public hearings. They're actual public hearings that you call to order in a board meeting where you are soliciting comments from the public on what they think maps should look like. What neighborhoods do they think go together, and what are commonly observed dividing lines that would make a logical place for you to divide the district, and what communities of interest should you keep together. There's a variety of factors, but those are comments to public hearings before maps are ever drawn, and they're required by the law. The next thing is then you draw you draw, but you hire a demographer, and typically you would hire a demographer, or we would hire a demographer for you and just pass the cost through at no markup at all. And they would draw the maps for you. Draw usually 3 maps, dividing the district different ways along the lines of trying to meet all of the criteria in the California Voting Rights Act and the Federal Voting Rights Act. And you can see what some of them are. You have to comply with the U.S. Constitution. A big one is the population. The population is supposed to be as nearly equal as possible. And that's just human beings. That's infants to old people, regardless of registration, whether they're registered voters or not. It's just the total number of human beings living in an area. And so it's supposed to be as close as possible in population. They have to be geographically contiguous. You can't have part of District 1 over here and part of District 1 over here with 2, 3, and 4 in between. They have to connect. You follow local communities of interest. You follow natural boundaries to the extent that you can. There's a lot of, there has been over the years a lot of talk about, well, what role does incumbency play and where the board members live? And yes?
What's the definition of a community?
Good question. That's kind of I'll give you my definition. And typically what it means, if people of like socioeconomic or like situation or like nationality living together, or in a particular location within your district. In some districts, particular populations like to live in the same area, and there's a higher concentration in one neighborhood than there might be in another. That would be a local community of interest. So, geographical compactness, you can't stretch them out. The gerrymandering, you've probably all heard about gerrymandering that occurs. You could do that here too, but that gets you into trouble, so you're not supposed to. And back to the incumbency. Some people will take the position that you have to do this completely blind, that you can't know where you all live when you're drawing the boundaries. It doesn't really say that. It says that you can't use incumbency. You can't use this process to either favor or discriminate against incumbency. So typically what I see is that the address of the sitting board members are all known. The maps are drawn. If you live in far areas around the district, it very well could be that you have 5 districts and one of you are in each of them. But if you have a clump of you that live in one neighborhood, 2 or 3 of you could be in one district once the maps are drawn. And there will be a variety of maps for you to look at and for you to share with the community. Once those maps are drawn, then you move on to the next step, which is you had 2 pre-map public hearings, then you have 3 post-map public hearings where the maps have been drawn. Again, public comes, they get to look at the maps. Typically, a demographer will also set something up on your website with the maps and a toolkit where members of the public can log into it and actually tweak the maps a little bit based on their understanding of the community. And I've seen several districts who have actually adopted their final map was a map that was drawn by a community member as opposed to the demographer, because community members know the community better. So, and that makes sense. So making sure that that is an option as well. Once you've had those 3 post-map public hearings, the board's responsibility is to choose a map that you're going to move forward with. And once that is adopted, then your county office has a county committee on school district organization. And they will come out. They're required by law to hold a hearing here in your district. Doesn't have to be here, but somewhere within the district boundaries, where they review the process and the map that you've chosen, and then the county will approve, and most likely. Of all the ones I've done, and actually, of all the ones I've done, they've always approved the map, let me put it that way. Of all the ones I've heard of, there have been 2, thankfully, that we didn't do, where the county committee exercised their right, which understand that they have the right to not approve your map, and they can pick a different map. But so long as you follow the process, you get community input, and then you present that to the county committee, it's highly likely that they will approve the map that you choose. And then we move on to a waiver, because the way the law, this is a different type of thing. Now stop thinking about the maps, but the law requires that whenever a public agency changes its mode of electing its officials, that change has to be put to a vote of the community, of your voters. And so we have potential waiver from the State Board of Education here. Every district that has made this change gets a waiver from the State Board of Education. Why is that? Why wouldn't you want the people to vote on it? Well, the reason is that if you put it to the electorate, first of all, you go through the cost of the election, and second, if the voters vote down the change along racially polarized lines, you now have Exhibit A in the lawsuit against you. And so that's why the State Board of Education has instituted this waiver process, and it's just a matter of course. You send in the waiver request showing that you've taken the steps that are required. I mean, you have a conversation with your labor unions, you speak to your school site councils, make them all aware of what's going on, and then you document that in the letter and the petition, you send it in, they approve these waivers without fail. I have not ever seen one not approved. And that also expedites the process. It reduces the cost, and it also eliminates the possibility of the election being grounds for a lawsuit against you at a later date. Final steps. Once that map has been approved, the county office has approved it, you've received the waiver, we file it with the county registrar of voters, and then that has to be done by June before the November election. So whenever the next, so 2020, it would be need to be filed with the registrar of voters before June. Yes, correct. And I've seen some of them go up pretty close, but given a timeline where we are now, there would be no trouble with that at all. And then you hold the governing board elections for, I believe are there 2 people up? Yeah, so there would be 2 elections, 2 trustee areas that would hold elections in 2020 if you decide to go that way. Other things to keep in mind: the boundaries have to be redrawn every 10 years after the federal census. That's part of the law. And so you would hold an election in 2020 for 2, then you would redraw the boundaries, and then hold an election in 2022 for the other 3. And then those boundaries would stay the same for 10 years until they'd be redrawn after the 2030 census. So that's another thing to keep in mind that you all need to know. It does not change your district boundaries, doesn't change your attendance boundaries at all, and it doesn't change how the district is supposed to be governed. The thing that I hear a lot from boards that are considering this is, well, it may change the way our board views their role, or board members view their role, because now they're only responsible to a certain section of the district as opposed to the whole district. And all I can say about that is that may be human nature, but the legal obligation of a board member, you take the same oath, you still have the same fiduciary duty and duty of loyalty to the entire district. And those are things to take into consideration when you select a map and when you're talking to the demographer about how to draw the maps. I've seen a lot of districts that will draw the boundaries specifically to cross as many attendance boundaries as possible, so that you don't wind up with a board member that says, well, this is my school and that's where my loyalty is. Where if you have several schools, parents from several schools that are voting for you, maybe you just have one school in your trustee area, but you've got parents that send their kids to a lot of other schools that also vote for you. It kind of helps assure that people keep the whole district in mind when they're serving on the board. So with that, I think that is my last one. Yes, it is. So Are there any questions or comments? Yes.
I just wanted clarification on the county committee. So how is that formed and where do those members basically come from?
Okay, the County Committee on School District Organization is a standing functioning committee of the county office. And it is made up of, I'm sure if you go on your county Office of Education website, you'll be able to find that committee, but it's made up of appointees or members from various school districts around the county. So maybe you don't have any from this board that are on it.
I worked there for 7 years. I don't recall with that committee. It may be there. I just
It's a committee of other elected officials from around the county that serve as that committee on school district organization. It's not a real active committee, but is one that's required to have by law. And the only place that I've ever run into them, and I guess 2 different places, is through this CVRA transition process and a unification process. If a district is unifying, the County Committee on School District Organization gets involved in that. And if the committee is, when a school district is changing their election process, I see them get involved in that. I have not researched them to know what else they do, but those are the 2 areas that I've come in contact with it. Yes.
You call it the county committee on
School district organization.
Would it be best to have the pre-map, post-map, public meetings separate from our regular board meetings, so as to not select for moving standard procedure to have them? If we have enough board meetings before and after the maps, would it be okay to, or would it seem like we're just trying to vary, perceptions of the board?
Yeah, I would say public hearings, typically you hold public hearings at a board meeting. And so I don't see any problem with that. But if there is a concern about an appearance that the board is not really providing an adequate opportunity for public comment and feedback, what I've seen many districts do, actually most districts, will hold the public hearings at a board meeting, at a regular board meeting if you can do it, but you may not have enough, and so you may have to schedule a special meeting for one of those. But also, you could schedule a couple of community meetings that you may hold at a gymnasium or an all-purpose or multi-purpose facility at one of your or 2 of your schools, where the demographer will come out and put up a large blow-up of the map options, and members of the public can come in, you advertise it. They can actually interact with the maps, put their fingers on it and say, this is where I live. This neighborhood is very similar to this neighborhood over here, and you've got a line here. Why don't you draw this line over here? And that's really good feedback for the demographer that you pick up in those community meetings. So that's always an option, and it's an option that most school districts actually do.
Mark, that's actually a great point, because we did that process when we worked on the bond. Even though we had the bond information things at our board session, we actually went out to the sites so that we could capture parents and teachers, because they just don't all come to the meetings, as you can see. So the idea is we've got to get on the road and we've got to get to them. So
the one thing I would caution you about that, that's not a board meeting of the community meeting, so it would be limited to 2 of you. If you had two of them, you could say, well, 2 people could volunteer to go to one, and then 2 others could volunteer to go to another one.
Okay.
So you just be careful about that. Other questions?
who has to organize all of this? Is it done by somebody in the district staff? Is it done by somebody we hire? Like overseeing the public meetings, is that a third party group that we hire, like the demographers, or is it somebody on the district staff that organizes all and we just bring the demographers in?
It's typically done in-house with either the CBO a lot of times, not to pick on you, but many times it's the superintendent or the CBO that attends the community meetings, and working directly with the superintendent. We're basically involved from throughout the process. We work with a handful of demographers who really know their stuff and do this as on the regular course of their business. They know how to handle these things. Many times we've shown up at community meetings with one lawyer and one demographer and all the maps. We set it up. There may be a school district official or 2 that show up, but we've done so many of these that the demographer, whoever you might happen to choose, and somebody from our firm will know how to handle these. So it's not going to fall on, it's not going to be an extra significant burden for somebody.
So Peter, just to reiterate too, we still need to comply within the number of days that are designated as the timeline process. Because one of the things that we also were chatting about was knowing that the census is next year.
Mhm.
And the idea of not having to pay that expense twice, but that would make us vulnerable for that letter and the $30,000 anyways. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yes, once you're outside that, say you adopt a resolution tonight, just hypothetically, you adopt a resolution,
Mhm.
but you decide we're going to wait until after the census in 2020. So you'll do it in 2021. For the 2022 election,
Correct.
once the 90 days from the passage of the resolution has passed, you're outside of the safe harbor language, and any organization or plaintiff's lawyer could send the letter at that point. Or at that point, they could even file a lawsuit, because they have to file the letter, send the letter to get you to spark a 45-day process for you to pass a resolution. And then that triggers the 90 days. And once the 90 days expire, then they're free to actually go directly to a lawsuit. So, I mean, it would be a roll of the dice as to whether or not you think someone would do that. And I can't tell you whether or not they would or not. I do know that I've been opposite several plaintiffs' attorneys that if they saw a chance to make a quick 30,000, they probably would. But I can't say for sure.
Well,
Yes.
I think, for me personally, I don't like the idea of taking a roll of the dice with our kids' money, because that's exactly what we're dealing with. The other thing that concerns me is, and I think you can tell by the enthusiasm in my voice, I'm not happy about doing this. We are a small town, and I don't think it's going to be to our benefit. But I get it's the law. I understand that. I also realize too that Benicia is, I think we're the only one left in the county that has not either been impacted by the change or a letter at some point. So I would imagine we're going to have a red flag pretty soon once our neighboring city finishes, because they're in the process right now.
Yeah.
So
Again, this is a little speculation on my part, but I believe some of the attorneys that do this kind of work, they keep a list of districts that have changed or haven't, and they have a list of who to send to next. And we've seen a batch of letters recently that all went out on the same day from one of the attorneys. So
right.
I wouldn't think that would happen by accident. I think that's probably what happened. I think you had your hand up.
I have a couple questions. And I'm not sure who to address this to, but do we have any idea the percentage of schools in Solano County, part of SCO, that have done this, or are in process of this happening currently with them? Like they've already started the process, do we have it, or are getting in trouble, getting letters and not following through, or do we have any idea on percentage?
I do not have an idea on percentage. I know that I'm working with another district in the area, but I can't tell you what the percentage is. But I would imagine that the county office, someone at the county office would be able to tell you. Probably whoever the staff person is that works with the Committee on School District Organization would be able to tell you how many districts have converted or are in the process of converting.
And then another question was, and we had discussed this briefly at the last meeting, was the city might have to go through this process, correct? And our city council is comprised of 4 board members and a mayor, whereas we're comprised of 5 trustees with certain, like we have a president and a second person in charge. But is there any way, if they're going to have to do these maps, and we have to do these maps, that we don't do it together? Could we not do it together? Save some costs, number one. And what's the other thing I was thinking? And it would be with the understanding that all 5 of us would still deal with the whole district, not just one specific area, and then have the president of the board be voted on, like as a separate, just like the mayor is voted on. So you
Okay.
have 4 plus the mayor, and they still serve the same amount of terms, time and terms. I mean, is that,
Well, first of all, there's nothing in the law that provides for kind of a super board member who's elected to serve at on behalf of the entire community, as opposed to the other 4 serving from a trustee area. And so I don't see how that could work. And I guess, I mean, if let's play this out. So one of you would be elected at large for a 4-year term and would be the board president for a 4-year term. So there would no longer be any rotation. I think that's going to require a legislative change for school districts to be able to do that, because the Ed Code doesn't provide for that type of an arrangement. You either have a 5-member board or a 7-member board. You can arrange for, if you're an extremely small district, you might be able to get away with 3. Always has to be an odd number.
right?
But there's no provision in the law for the mayor type, what I'll call the super board member, who gets to represent the whole district and be voted on by the whole district, other than an at-large election. And an at-large election is outside of the safe harbor of the California Voting Rights Act.
Right.
So even if you did something like that, you'd still be vulnerable to a lawsuit because you wouldn't be complying with the California Voting Rights Act.
Thank you for your opinion there.
Then the schools in Solano County, my understanding is that Fairfield Sassoon did it a number of years ago. Vacaville was given the demand letter last year, and they went through the process and completed it. Apparently Dixon was given a demand letter, I think, several years ago. And I'm not sure where that landed, and I'm not sure where Travis is.
So a big percentage then.
Yes,
Have
and
received or have gone through the process or are going through the process.
yes, and I think Martinez did. I think Dublin
Martinez
did.
finished it 2 years
And
ago.
I think Vallejo, Trustee Moss was talking about Vallejo going through the process.
And their city council.
Thank you. I really appreciate the
Sure.
information.
Any other questions?
Can you take us through the resolution? Would that be?
Oh, I don't have the resolution in front of me. I'm going to have to move up. Oh, okay. Here we go.
So, so just as you tee this up, so you'll read through these whereas clauses and give the trustees an opportunity to weigh in and ask any questions, and if they're comfortable with it, if they wanted to move ahead with this, that it would call for a.
I do have one more question before we get to that part. Okay, so say we get all of our areas divided up. We have all of our trustee areas established. What happens if we don't have somebody run within that trustee area? Then what options would we have?
Okay. It would be just like someone resigning from this board. Anytime there's a vacancy on a board, the remaining board members have the obligation and right to appoint a board member to fill that seat. The only requirement, though, the additional requirement would be you'd have to find a board member that lived in that area and appoint them. But that's the way you fill it, is the same way you'd fill any vacancy now, as you appoint someone, but the requirement is they live in that trustee area. Okay?
You want to walk us through the resolution?
Sure. I'll read through them, and then if there's anything that raises a question, please let me know. And I'll read through the entire thing. Resolution of the Governing Board of the Benicia Unified School District, Resolution number 19-2003. Resolution to initiate a transition to a by-trustee area election system, commencing with the 2020 Governing Board election and statement of intent to seek a waiver of the election requirement from the State Board of Education. Whereas the Benicia Unified School District Board of Education Board is keenly aware of the importance of maintaining a fair election system. Whereas the board has always strived to listen to all voices in the community and represent all of our community. Whereas California Education Code sections 5019A and C 1 and 5030 authorizes the Solano County Committee on School District Organization, the county committee, upon application of a school district's governing board to change the method of election of governing board members in a school district under its jurisdiction. Any questions so far? Okay. Whereas the California Voting Rights Act, Elections Code, section 14025 et sec, called the CVRA, prohibits the use of at-large election systems for governing board members of a school district if the at-large elections impair the ability of a protected class to elect candidates of its choice or its ability to influence the outcome of an election. Whereas governing board members of the Benicia Unified School District, the district, are currently elected using an at-large election system. For example, election system in which registered voters of the entire jurisdiction elect candidates to the governing board. And whereas, although the board has not received a demand letter alleging that the board's at-large board member electoral system violates the CVRA and threatening litigation if the board declines to voluntarily change to a district-based election system for electing board members, the board has directed staff to initiate the process to establish by trustee area elections to avoid costs associated with receiving such a demand letter and potentially defending a lawsuit based on the CVRA, even if that lawsuit were to reach a settlement in a timely manner. Any questions yet? Okay. Whereas, although Education Code section 5020 requires that a county committee's resolution approving a change in the method of electing governing board members be submitted to the electorate for its approval at the school district's next regular election, the board intends to seek a waiver of the voter approval requirements as permitted by law. Education Code sections 33050 through 33053 authorize the State Board of Education to waive this voter approval requirement, which could reduce the cost and risks associated with the school district's transition to by trustee area elections system. Whereas the board finds it is appropriate to seek a waiver of the election requirement in Education Code section 5020 and portions of sections 5019, 5021, and 5030 to ensure the timely implementation of the by trustee area election system commencing with the 2020 governing board election to reduce costs for the district associated with placing an item on the ballot and to reduce any potential legal liability or financial risk to the district under the CVRA. Any questions? Okay. Whereas the adoption of by trustee area elections will not affect the terms of any sitting board members, each of whom will serve out his or her current term, and whereas the board, cognizant of its need for fiscal responsibility, desires to implement this change in the manner of electing board members in the most cost-effective and efficient manner, now therefore, the governing board of the Benicia Unified School District does hereby resolve, order, and determine as follows. Any questions on the whereas? Okay. To determine as follows. Number one, the above recitals are true and correct. Two, the board hereby determines that the trustee area boundary lines shall be developed based on the federal census data to provide for by trustee area elections commencing in 2020. Number three, by this resolution and pursuant to Education Code sections 5019A and 5030, the board directs district staff, when appropriate, to transmit this resolution to the Solano County Committee on School District Organization to apply to have the county committee adopt a change in the method of electing members of the board from at-large elections, Ed Code section 5030A, to by trustee area elections, Ed Code section 5030B, commencing with the 2020 board elections. Number four, before submitting a final proposal to the county committee for a trustee area plan using the federal census data, multiple public hearings shall be scheduled to obtain public input on the draft proposals prepared. Number five, the board shall apply to the county committee for establishment of trustee areas pursuant to Education Code section 5019A in a timely manner to have the 2020 elections for the board conducted within the new trustee areas. Number six, the superintendent or his designee shall send a copy of this resolution to the county committee for action in accordance with law. Number seven, the superintendent or his designee is hereby directed to prepare an additional board resolution and implement the applicable legal requirements in a timely manner to seek a waiver from the State Board of Education of the election requirement imposed by Election Code Section 5020. Number 8, the superintendent or his designee may consult with legal counsel to resolve all legal issues necessary to give effect to this resolution. Number 9, the foregoing resolution shall take effect immediately upon its adoption. And then the last part is passed and adopted by, and then the list of the ayes and nays.
I did have one other question that came to mind while we
Yes.
were talking. You had mentioned early consulting with our unions, and so what does our union staff have involvement in this? Like, why our unions are they?
Consulting with the unions, and I think I also mentioned school site councils, the waiver process, and I can provide a memo to you on this, or maybe I already have to Charles, I'm not sure, about the waiver process requires that you get feedback or input from different constituency groups.
So it's an alternative consultation process.
Yes,
Okay.
because it's a way of, it's a box that you need to check in order to get the waiver. Because if you just submit the waiver and say, we didn't talk to anybody about this, then they might turn it down. But if you talk to your labor unions, you talk to your school site councils, the
Yeah.
constituencies within that represent people in the district, let them know what you're doing and why. Then you can say that in your petition, and then the state board says, okay, they've talked to the right people, they're not going to be surprised, nobody's going to be upset because, well, we wanted to vote on this change. And you can share the information that, like I did here, although it'd be a shorter version probably, but we're doing this to save costs. And this is, we're doing this to comply with the safe harbor language of the California Voting Rights Act so that we don't get sued and wind up having to pay attorney's fees to somebody to force us to do this when we can control the process if we do it on our own.
And obviously there'll be more to come, and I already had meetings with union presidents for both CSCA and BTA.
All right, are there any comments or questions or reactions to the resolution? Yeah.
Yeah, but it would be a 2-year wait because we wouldn't get the census data.
We
for
would
months
get
after.
the letter. We would get the
Yeah.
letter within those 2 years.
Yeah. And I thought the same thing. Like, we have to do it.
Yes, we do.
I know. Especially now that we're exploring it, it's almost like we've just like,
Opened
okay,
the box.
we've opened the box. So now it's like, all right, any other comments or questions? I know everybody is like, okay.
Can we motion to
I have a motion, well, go for
I'm
it.
sorry, I just have one more question. Okay, so we have our area, our trustee areas established. Is there, when it's time to go through the voting process during the election, are there percentages based on the trustee areas in terms of the vote itself? Or, you know, like, does it have to be 50% of that population within that trustee area? Are there any, you know, parameters around that?
As I guess, let me make sure I'm understanding the question. So there's two people running for one seat from one area. Is that the question about that election requirement?
Or if it's just one, what if it's just one person?
If it's one, you're running unopposed, you're going to win.
Okay.
And if it's 2 or 3, you don't have to reach 50%. It's just the top vote getter is the one who would win.
Okay. I was just curious, yeah.
And if 2 people were in that jurisdiction or that area that were running, like, I don't know where all of us live exactly, but if there were 2 coming up at the same time, they're running against each other.
They could be if
They're in
they
the
both
same
decide to
trustee
run.
area.
Right,
Yeah, if they both
Yeah, we're running against each other.
right.
If you both decide to run at the same time, then you'd be running against each other. Now, if one of you, your term expires in 2020 and one in 2022, then whoever's expires in 2020 wouldn't be able to run at all because the seat's filled, but they could run again in 2022.
Okay.
Okay, we're ready.
All right, so are we ready?
Yes.
I'd like to call for a motion to approve the resolution number, get back to the top, I'm sorry. Resolution number 19-20-03.
I'll make a motion to I propose that we vote on the resolution for trustee by, election by trustee area.
I second the motion.
Okay, Georgina, I believe it's a resolution. We need a roll call vote on this.
President Ferrucci.
Yes?
Trustee Hogan.
Yes.
Trustee Maselli.
Yes.
Trustee Muss.
Yes.
And Trustee Seda.
Yes.
Motion
All right. I think the resolution passes. Peter, I want to thank you for coming and helping us to clarify
So
this. I'm
We,
absolutely wet.
so, okay, we've approved the resolution. Now, if I remember, we've got to start, we have 30 days to do the 2 pre-map meetings, correct?
You have to do the 2 pre-map meetings within 30 days of each
Right.
other. Yes.
Of each other, but like for 30 days from now, or no?
That's the best thing to do, would be to do them right away, because otherwise then you're going to compress the 3
Yeah.
post-map hearings into a really short time
Do,
period.
do we have
So-
2 regular stated board meetings in the next 30 days?
We have one on the 19th,
And then we
third,
should-
and then the 17th.
So the 3rd, so if we did it on the 19th and the 3rd, if we had that as part of our regular board meeting, then we'd be covered on that.
Because this has just put us into safe haven, right?
If
So we
it
have
was-
90
yeah.
days to finish, and the clock just started
And
ticking
that's-
right now, right?
Did I send you a timeline with the memo? A draft timeline? I think
Okay.
there was a draft timeline which can be tweaked, but we tried to use the board meetings that you had calendared to the extent that we could.
Good, thank you. Oh, so you've already planned them out for the board meetings?
We've laid it out in a
Oh,
in a
excellent, okay.
draft timeline.
Outstanding,
One other
thanks.
question that I need answered is, we need to get a demographer. And we can do it however you would like. I mean, typically, we send out a request for proposal. Basically, there's 3 or 4 demographic groups that do the bulk of this work. We ask them to send a proposal for the cost and what that would include. We then send that to the superintendent, the CBO. You guys tell us who you want to work with, and then they contract with us, and we just pass that through as a cost at no markup to you. The other way you could do it is you could solicit them and then bring a contract back here to the board if you'd like to do it that way. It doesn't really matter to us. But if you want us to do it, just let us know so we can do it right away. Sure thing. Thank you.
So thank you very much. And then, so Dr. Young, you already have a tentative timeline?
Yes.
Okay, so then we could, okay, and then so that we could use our board meetings and get
So the
going.
tentative timeline means in this
Last Thursday, yeah, we don't have that.
it's written.
Okay.
It didn't quite make sense.
So yes, I'm going to adjourn our board meeting. Okay, so is everybody set? No more questions officially?
Yeah.
Meeting is adjourned.